You're sitting at your desk on a Wednesday afternoon, halfway through a cold cup of coffee you forgot existed about 40 minutes ago. You're technically looking at a spreadsheet, but your brain clocked out somewhere around the third slide of the last all hands. And then your work friend appears at your cubicle. They've got that look, slightly conspiratorial, leaning in just close enough to signal this is between you and them. "I just want you to know," they say, "I always have your back." And something in you relaxes, because this place is exhausting, and having one person genuinely in your corner feels like an unexpected gift in a building full of people pretending to care about Q3 pipeline hygiene. Nothing says I value you as a colleague quite like a whispered alliance in the break room, right? Here's what nobody told you at your company orientation. The person most likely to damage your career isn't the aggressive coworker who challenges you openly in meetings. It's not the loud one who takes credit for everything in front of the team. According to organizational psychologists who study competitive workplace dynamics, the person most positioned to harm your professional trajectory is the one who brings you coffee. The one who laughs at your jokes even when they land completely flat. The one who says you're literally the only person in this building who gets it. Pay close attention to the last thing I'm going to tell you today, because it might completely change how you see your most trusted colleague at the office. The first thing to watch for is agreement that never ends. You've probably noticed it, even if you never flagged it as a concern. Every idea you pitch, they love. Every frustration you name, they validate entirely. Every decision you agonize over, they tell you was absolutely the right call. It feels like loyalty, but social psychologist Edward E. Jones, in research conducted at Duke University in the 1960s, formally named this pattern ingratiation. Ingratiation is not friendship. It is the deliberate strategy of mirroring someone's preferences and emotional state to build their trust, not because you agree, but because you want access to something they have. Research published in the Academy of Management Journal found that ingratiators in competitive professional environments are statistically more likely to be building access to your information, your network connections, or your actual role. They're not mapping your friendship, they're mapping your vulnerabilities. So the next time someone agrees with literally everything you say, don't feel flattered. Feel curious. That curiosity becomes even more important when you realize what they do with the information they collect. What comes next might make you reconsider the last real conversation you had near the coffee machine. Stop for a second and think. Is there someone at your office who consistently steers your conversations toward complaints about your manager, your team, or company decisions? Someone who asks, "Doesn't it bother you when they do that?" and leans in carefully when you start to answer? If what I'm about to explain changes everything. Behavioral researchers describe this as social reconnaissance, and it works through what some psychologists call a confidence extraction loop. You share a frustration. They validate it. You go deeper. They go quiet and absorb. And the next morning, they're having a private conversation with your manager about concerns they've been picking up on the team. Your name isn't mentioned. The information is specific enough that the trail leads there anyway. The mechanism behind this connects to neuroscientist Matthew Lieberman's research at UCLA on the social brain. Human beings are neurologically wired to trust people who share their grievances. Complaining together triggers the release of oxytocin, the same bonding chemical activated by physical closeness. Your nervous system cannot distinguish between a real ally and someone performing one with surgical precision. Most people assume the office gossip is the most dangerous person in the building. Organizational psychology has a much quieter name for what I just described, and it's definitely not gossip. What happens next is where it becomes operational. Here's something that tends to surprise people. Most of us are conditioned to see a colleague's offer to help during a high-stakes moment as an act of generosity, and sometimes it genuinely is. But research on competitive professional dynamics shows a different pattern when the person offering help also happens to want what you have. When your work friend volunteers to step in on your project right before a high-visibility moment, they are not rescuing you. They're inserting themselves into the credit chain, making sure that when your boss asks who was involved, their name comes up naturally and early. And the reason you can't easily decline is deeply psychological. Refusing help in a team setting makes you look territorial or difficult. They've created a situation where you lose regardless of your response. Say yes, and they get partial credit. Say no, and you become the one who doesn't collaborate well. That trap is frustrating, but it's actually one of the easier patterns to spot once you know what to look for. The next one is almost completely invisible. Think about the last time your credibility was questioned in front of people who matter. A meeting where someone needed to confirm the idea was originally yours, or that the timeline was always unrealistic. Think about where your work friend was in that moment. Somewhere between quiet and invisible, if I had to guess. Psychologists John Darley and Bib Latane documented this pattern in their landmark 1968 research at Columbia University on what they called the bystander effect. The more personally costly an act of support becomes, the more people disengage from it, diffusing responsibility until no one acts. In a covert workplace dynamic, this silence is not hesitation. It's a calculated position. Your friend stays close enough to benefit from your visibility during your wins. They disappear just far enough to share none of your risk. Self-assessment. Think about the last time your name was questioned in a room that mattered. Who stayed silent? That silence is a data point, not an accident. And this brings us to the pattern that ties everything together. Organizational psychologists studying lateral competition in professional environments have documented what some researchers call shadow positioning, a process where a peer systematically builds the visibility, relationships, and institutional knowledge that would make them a credible replacement for you, without ever declaring competitive intent. They attend meetings you're excluded from and explain they're staying aligned to support you better. They build direct relationships with your key stakeholders under the banner of cross-functional collaboration. They learn your role's inner logic, your critical contacts, your most important projects. And then, when a restructuring happens, or an opportunity opens, or you have one difficult quarter, they're already there, already trusted, already familiar. Research from organizational behavior scholars suggests that by the time shadow positioning becomes visible to the person being targeted, the transition is often already in motion. That's the picture I needed you to see before we get to what you can actually do about it. So now that you can see the board clearly, now that you know exactly what's happening and why, how do you respond? Not with emotion. Not with a dramatic confrontation that gets you labeled difficult and gives them exactly what they need. You respond with precision. Here are 3 moves that shift the dynamic without starting a single fight. The first is what I call the selective information diet. Not every piece of your thinking needs to reach this person. The next time they steer the conversation toward your frustrations, your strategic plans, or your concerns about the company, give them something true but low stakes, a surface observation, a minor opinion. Reserve your real concerns and genuine plans for people who have demonstrated actual loyalty through behavior, not words. This works because the social reconnaissance loop depends entirely on access. You can't extract what was never offered. The second is the public credit timestamp. When you complete something significant, a project, a proposal, a key decision, send a brief written update to your manager and relevant stakeholders within 24 hours. Keep it simple. Just wanted to close the loop on the X initiative. We landed on approach Y, which directly addresses the adoption concern you raised last quarter. Happy to walk anyone through the reasoning. No drama, no accusation. But what you've created is a verifiable time-stamped record of your contribution that exists in writing before anyone else can reframe the narrative. Strategic credit transfer only works in the absence of documentation. You just made documentation automatic. The third is what I call the direct stakeholder bridge. Don't wait for your work friend to be the connection between you and the people who matter. Build those relationships directly. Schedule brief monthly one-on-ones with senior colleagues, framed as alignment conversations, not networking. Ask for their perspective on a current challenge. Share a relevant insight. Be present in their professional world independently. Shadow positioning depends on your isolation from your own stakeholders. Closing that isolation removes the foundation the strategy is built on. These moves will shift the balance in ways the other person won't fully understand or see coming. But there's something deeper happening here that no tactic can address on its own. And it's the most important thing I need to say to you today. If you recognize someone specific in what I described, I want you to be clear about one thing. Being targeted by this kind of behavior is not a sign of weakness. It is almost always a sign of value. People do not invest months of strategic patience and emotional performance in someone who has nothing worth taking. The fact that someone is running this playbook near you means you have something, your credibility, your relationships, your position, that someone else wants badly enough to spend considerable effort on. Organizational psychologists who study competitive workplace behavior note that covert lateral competition almost exclusively targets people perceived as high value. The people who are simply overlooked don't get managed, they get ignored. If you're being managed this way, you're being competed with. That distinction matters more than it might feel like right now. And yes, it still stings to realize someone you trusted was operating with a second agenda. That part is real. But it changes what you do next. You stop being confused. You stop wondering if you imagined it. You stop giving the benefit of the doubt to patterns that have stopped deserving it. And you start making decisions based on the full picture, which is exactly what they were hoping you would never do. Has anything like this ever happened to you at work? Tell me your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and some of the most accurate observations about how offices actually work have come from you, not from any study I've ever come across. If you want to keep decoding what's really happening around you at the office, stick around. I'll see you in the next one.